Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Running Tales podcast, where we look to tell the extraordinary stories of everyday athletes. My name's Craig Lewis, and today's guest is Studney Kirby, and we'll be talking to Studney about, well, a whole host of different runs and running that he's done throughout his varied running career. Top of which is having a crack at the Marathon des Sables back in the day, when some people might say it was a little bit tougher than it might be now. You know, you didn't get to carry all your water with you and that sort of stuff. So we'll have a chat with Studney in a minute, but just a little bit of housework before we do that. Just a reminder that Running Tales is part of the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network, and if you're listening to this on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast, remember to look for Everyday Athlete Podcast Network rather than Running Tales, else you won't find us. You might also be listening to us on the social media platforms of Run, Try, Bike. So hello, if you're listening to us live right now. We are part of a network of 9 podcasts, and what we really love is when you like, share, and positively review what we do, because we're a growing community and we love to chat to you all as well. So let us know what you think of our conversations. Anyway, without further ado, let's bring Studney Kirby forward and have a chat to him about running, about MDS, and about all kinds of other stuff as well. And Studney, I wanted to start with you by kind of going back in time, beyond MDS, beyond all those sort of things, to when running was a new thing for you at school. How did you first get into the sport?
Oh, I love running, Craig. Yeah, it's I played football and ran at school, but I was average at football, and I thought I was good at running. So I loved that at school. I did sort of 800, 1500, and a lot of cross country, and really enjoyed it. It was my thing down. I lived in Essex and London at the time, so it was quite competitive, but I really enjoyed it, and I did that for probably from 7 till about 15, 16, and then life got in the way. But during that period, it was my thing, and always has been. Football come and go, but running was something I just loved.
And I'm guessing, and this might just be putting my own experience on sports around the age of 15, 16, that they kind of go to the side slightly when things like I don't know, alcohol and girls and all the good stuff comes along.
Yeah, I've never drank, so it's never been alcohol, but certainly clubbing and going something that took over. And I worked a lot. I've always worked, so I worked a lot, and running took a bit of a backseat for quite a while. I still enjoyed watching it at Olympics and Europeans and all that kind of stuff. I'd love to watch it, but never really. I don't think I ran at all for 7, 8, 9 years or so. Played a bit of football, but really didn't do anything. Went to the gym a bit, but didn't run. And I don't have an excuse really. I could have done, and in hindsight, perhaps I should have done, but I didn't. I just seemed to stop at that age, and it wasn't drinking, but it was certainly clubbing and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I did enjoy my time. I did enjoy it.
I speak to quite a lot of runners who are decent runners now, and have either not run at all when they were young or gave it up for a little while. And I always kind of wonder whether you regret missing that period where you were potentially the very best. If you'd have worked hard at that stage, you were potentially the very best runner you ever could have been.
Oh, definitely. In my head, I would have been a champion. Yeah, absolutely. It was, now I do regret. I wish I'd carried on at 16. I did join a club. I think I joined rugby in Northampton Phoenix, as they were called then. And I went to a couple of sessions with them when I was about 14, 15. But it didn't last. I just stopped. And I do regret now not carrying that on, because I think I probably would have been a better runner now. But who knows? Who knows what would have happened. But I do regret not carrying on, because I was decent. I was okay. I wasn't going to set the world alight, but I think I could have run some okay times. And of course, that time's gone. But yeah, that is a period that I missed out on through my own fault, really.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, because I've spoken to some other people, and you might do you know? I don't know if you know Pete Currington at all.
Yeah.
And Pete obviously did a lot of running when he was younger and kind of kept going. And he said actually one of the things that he thinks is that he almost did too much running when he was younger, and it's having an effect on him now. Whereas people perhaps like yourself who took that break are maybe able to keep going at a higher level for longer.
Yeah, I guess that could be true. I think there's a lot of people that were very good runners back in the day when I was running. and maybe did it for a little while longer, but aren't running now, or come back to it much later. So yeah, there is that side of it, isn't there? If you do too much too young, it can affect you later on, and you just fall out of love with it. So maybe I did the right thing. Maybe I've come back to it. I've been running for quite a few years now, so I'm enjoying it. So although I did miss out that period from a times perspective, I might have been quicker. Actually, it's probably served me in good stead now.
Yeah. And what was it that led you back into the sport? Because I think there's a bit of a funny story behind this.
Yeah, it was. I was working at a bank at the time, and I don't think I'd started running at all. I might have just gone out for a few jogs with a few guys that I work with. And my manager, Crispin, a chap called Crispin, who I think had done a marathon, I'm sure he had, and we were chatting, and I was full of it. And I said, I can't remember what time he said he'd done, but I said, I think I can do a marathon an hour quicker than you can do it. And so he said, well, okay, let's see. And so that was about 1997. I'd never done a marathon. I'd never done a half marathon at that point. I don't think I'd even done a 5K, not in a competitive sense. But I'd seen people do marathons in 2 hours and something, and thought, how hard can it be? How hard can a 3 hour marathon be? So we had this challenge set that I'm not sure we were going to do it that year or the year after, that we would both run a marathon, and if I did it an hour quicker than him, I won the bet and some money to a charity, and if he did, then vice versa. But it didn't play out quite as planned. The only good thing about it is that I don't think he actually did a marathon anyway. So whatever time I did was going to be an hour quicker than him, because he didn't do one after that. But my maybe we'll talk about didn't go quite to plan.
Yeah, no. Tell me how it went, and I guess it is that. So many people, myself included, when you do that first leap up to a marathon, it's just so much harder than you can ever imagine.
Yeah, it looked easy, didn't it? I was watching guys on the TV do it, and even some of my friends run marathons, and sort of, it can't be that hard, can it? So I did start running, and I ran what I thought was quite a lot at that time, and did some shorter races and some training runs, 20 miles. There's I think Ashby, which is on now, an Ashby 20 race. I did that. Yeah. There was one near Peterborough called something, I can't think. Anyway, I did that one as well. Neither of which went very well, but I thought it would still be okay on the day. And I was running sort of 5 and 10Ks at okay times for me. So I did London Marathon in 90. I did London and New York both in 98, my first 2 marathons. And I set off in London at a pace I thought was good. And I think I got to halfway in about 1:35 or 6. Yeah. And I finished 1.5 hours. So the second half was painful. 3 hours to do half marathon, having done the first. And that humbled me a bit and taught me some lessons. It didn't teach me some lessons straight away, but over time it taught me some lessons that maybe it wasn't as easy as I thought. But 4.5 hours, 4 hours 35, I think, to be precise, was my first marathon in London. And it is one of those things when I finished it, thought, if anyone said I'm going to do another one of these, they're bonkers. And doing them, yeah, it was not a good experience.
I kind of did the same thing. I was running quite a lot of halves at the time, and you do this thing where you imagine that your half marathon time can just be doubled, which is madness, and it never works at all. But when you got to that finishing line and you were thinking, I never want to do this again, obviously you have done it again several times. What was it that changed your mind on that?
Well, I did New York the same year. So London was in April or May, and New York was in November. And I ran it with a friend of mine. I think we did 5 hours, but we planned to do that in 5 hours. We were going to have a good time and enjoy New York and do it. But I think during that period, although the first one didn't go very well, I did think I want to do more of this. I do enjoy it. I think more importantly, I made some really good friends through running at that time. That's still my good friends now. So that helped. So I started to run with them. And I have had periods, quite long periods, where I haven't run marathons. I've done short events. I haven't trained very much, but I've come back to marathons more recently, and my plan is to do quite a few more of them, and I'm really enjoying them. So I don't know what changed really. I think I've learned a bit more about how to run them, not to take them too seriously, and that no matter how well you're trying, they're going to hurt. They're hard. Then even the 5 hour New York plod was hard. By the time we'd finished, we know we'd done a marathon. So but there is something about marathon, isn't there? There's something about having completed that 26-mile distance. If you drive it in a car, you realise how far it is.
Yeah,
it's a lot. So I still love them, and so that, yeah, I think I do. I do like them. Yeah, I do love them.
I think the marathon, maybe it's because we see, and I'm sure this is the same for people in New York or Tokyo or any other of the big marathons, but we see so much of the London Marathon on TV every year. It's the biggest thing on the BBC, and it becomes the bucket list item for so many people, even if they are not runners at all. And it just has this hold on the nation's consciousness, really, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's you have those conversations with people, don't you? If you're a runner, and they automatically question, have you done London, or how far is it, which is a common one, isn't it? How far is the marathon in London? But yeah, London is an iconic, like the main city marathons are, but it's an iconic run, iconic race. So I did 98, 99 and 2001. So fairly all through. But those days you could enter the ballot and just get in, which is what I did. Yeah. And then I didn't do another one for 7, 8 or 9 years, and I did it again last year. Say this year, and did last year my 4th one, but 20 years after my first. So yeah, it does have a thing about London. Doing the London Marathon is something else.
Has it changed a lot over the years?
It's interesting you say that, because doing it last year, I did wonder what it was going to be like, not having done it for such a long time. And I think the noise running around London Marathon this time was more than I'd ever remembered, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't quite as intense as that when I did it back in the early 2000s. The noise now and the build up and the number of people is just quite overwhelming. I found it so anyway. It's just incessant from start to finish. It's incredible. So, and I don't remember it being like that early door. I think when I did it back in early 98, 99, whenever it was, that there were gaps in the crowd, quite regularly after the start, and there wasn't that this time. There was pretty much the whole way round our people. So I think it's certainly more well supported and louder than it was then.
And I think I mean, I'm not an expert on this, having I've never actually done it, although I'd like to, and I've been along and supported, and my wife Michelle has done it in 2023, I think. But I think perhaps going back to the late 90s, certainly earlier than that, it was kind of an elite event, or at least a sub-elite event. Whereas if you were entering it, you were a runner, you were someone who was in a run group, you did running every week. Whereas now, I don't want to say that the people who enter aren't runners, because if you run, you're a runner. That's the mantra, isn't it? But they are perhaps new to the sport. They may just, there's just more people doing it in all different ways, and I think that's perhaps what has then caused all the crowds to be even bigger and the whole event to be bigger.
Definitely so. I think it's back then it seemed like much more of a niche. Running was much more of a niche sport. It seemed to be. There were running clubs, and you would join a running club and you do a marathon like London or one of the big city marathons. Whereas now there are so many clubs, groups, running tribes, and just big groups of people that meet together to run, and then affiliate themselves to an organisation. So it's different now. It's definitely different, and there are a lot more. It's almost a trendy thing to do, I think, now, running, whereas it wasn't then, or it didn't feel like it was.
No, I think people used to look at runners as these slightly strange people who did these huge distances and never had any body fat on them and all these odd things. But it's that's definitely changed. You've mentioned that you've done London, I think 4 times. You've done New York. I know you've done some of the other big marathons around. What's been your favourite?
That's a question people always ask, isn't it? And so of the big ones, I've done Paris, Chicago, New York, and London. And I love Chicago. I love the city of Chicago, and the marathon was great, although I didn't have a good run there. I think if I had to pick one, it'd be New York. New York, I just found incredible. Yeah, as loud as London, harder than London. It's a hard run. Some hills or bridges that they are hills really. You're going up and down them, and I think if I could only do one more marathon, I think it would be New York. I'd love the city, and the marathon the city seems much more as a whole involved with the marathon because you run through the 5 boroughs than London. Although London does get lively, I don't think it's on the same level. But I think you might find New Yorkers might come here and think London is good. But in my view, if I could do one more, it'd be New York.
Yeah, it's great to have the opportunity to do all these incredible marathons and almost see parts of the world that you might not otherwise see through doing it. Have you ever had any thoughts about going on and doing the full list of majors?
Yeah, I keep applying for Berlin and got into the ballot yet. I did qualify for Boston for this year, which is in April. But the plan this year was to do Seville in March and then Boston in April. But for various reasons, neither are happening now. So if I'm going to do Boston, I've got to re-qualify, which hopefully I can do this year. So that will be, if I can get Boston done, and Tokyo would be the last on my list because I don't know why, I don't have a particular desire to go to Tokyo, and I know it's quite expensive, but if I do manage to get Berlin done and I do manage to get Boston done, I will try to get into Tokyo. So it will be, although there's 7 now, isn't it? I think Sydney is
added Sydney, yeah,
a bit frustrating, but I think yes, if I can get Boston and Berlin done, I will try and do Tokyo. But at the moment, I'm still sort of I'm only halfway there, so I've got quite a way to go, and it's not cheap.
No, I mean it is really. I hesitate to call it an elitist pursuit, but I guess it's a pursuit where you've got to be having a half decent income, and I wonder whether you think that takes it all away from the kind of ethos of running in terms of it's the sport where you're supposed to just be able to pull your trainers and head out the door, and it's not supposed to cost you a fortune.
Yeah, that is a bit of a frustration. I think running did used to be a relatively cheap sport. I don't think it is now. I think for a number of reasons, but I think look at the cost of trainers. If you're buying some of these carbon-plated trainers, and when they're talking about £200 carbon-plated trainers being good value, and the Nike ones at 300 or whatever they are, I don't think it's a cheap sport anymore. And because if you watch a lot of YouTube or you read a lot of stuff, there's this shoe rotation thing that seems to be everywhere, where you've got to have a trainer for this and a trainer for that, and that's not cheap to do. So I think I do think it's become more of an elitist sport if you want to have all of those named brand goods to run in or training. I think you can still do it on a fairly decent level. If you shop like Decathlon and places like that will still, you can get good gear from these places. I don't think there's any problem with that if you really want to. But if you want the proper name brand stuff, it's not a cheap sport anymore.
No, I think you're right, and I find it a really interesting one to look at. I mean, I went to the running show at the NEC the other week in Birmingham, and it's a good day out, but you are being sold stuff from the second you get in there. You're almost being sold that you need these trainers, or you won't be able to run that time, or you need to take this gel and these protein shakes, and etc., etc., etc. And look, don't get me wrong, there's obviously huge amounts of truth in all of these things, but sometimes my sort of opinion on it is some of it kind of forgets what running is actually all about: getting out there, enjoying yourself, having fun. And I also think that there is a danger of these things being used as a shortcut. I'll be able to run a sub 25k because I've got a pair of Vaporflies on, but I'm never actually going to do any hill training or fartlek or anything else.
No, you've still got to do the work. Yeah, there's no substitute for the work, is there? I think the trainers help. I don't think there's any doubt, certainly for me. Sure. And I know that I've bought some of these trainers, they've definitely helped. And whether I could have run some of the marathons I've done recently without them, who knows? But they definitely help. They've helped me. But like you say, it's a different world to 2020. Everything changes, doesn't it? To 25 years ago, when you could one pair of trainers, a pair of road trainers, a pair of off-road trainers, and that was it. You're good to go. It doesn't seem quite like that anymore.
Yeah. So let's wind the clock back to 2004. Was it when you did MDS? Yeah. What persuaded you that was a good idea?
Yeah, the guy I worked with then, and I still work with him now, he's an ultra runner, and he's doing marathon. He's doing joggle in March, I think. Yeah, and he's done all sorts of things. And but he wasn't an ultra runner then, but he'd done a marathon or two. And we were in an office. We had an office in Northampton, and I was just sitting in one office, in another office, and he came through to me and said, "Kirby, I've entered MDS. Get your name in." And I'm not even sure I knew what MDS was, but I guess we must have discussed it at that point.
Yeah.
I think it was run by a company in Birmingham that you would book through, and you could literally just ring up and say, "I'd like to do it, please," and you pay your deposit of £100, and you were in, and that's what I did. With that, I really had no clue what I was doing. I've done a couple of marathons at that point, or London a few times, and I've done some off-road cross countries for my club Wellingborough, but nothing of any consequence. But I entered and thought it'd be a great idea and figure out what to do along the way, and that's what we did. So,
at what point did panic set in when you suddenly realised what you had to do?
I think when I started to train with a backpack, I think because I bought a backpack and I thought, well, how hard can this be? And put the backpack on and started to load it with gear. And it dawned on me that you were carrying the gear for the week, your food for the week, not your water, but your food for the week, and clothing and your sleeping arrangements. You carried it with you, and you had to run. And so once I started to train with that, it did get easier, but it wasn't easy. And I think once I started to do that, I realised this wasn't going to be a walk in the park. Having said that, I it might be contentious, but I'm not actually sure it's as hard. They called it the hardest race on earth at that point, and the heat wasn't pleasant. But I'm not actually sure it was the hardest thing. Well, at that time, probably the hardest thing I'd done. I think I've done tougher things since, but it because you have so much time to do the event. You get, I think on a 20-kilometer stage, you probably get 7 or 8 hours to do it. You can literally walk. People do walk it. So if you pace it right, it's certainly very doable. I'm not sure about now. I think it's changed a bit now, and they do things slightly differently. But then, although it was hard and it was the heat that was the most uncomfortable, and waking up at stupid o'clock in the morning cold because it got cold overnight wasn't pleasant. It wasn't as hard as maybe I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I think that's really. I mean, obviously, I've never done MDS or anything like that, but I've done 100k around the Isle of Wight. Like I say, nothing like that. But that wasn't the hardest thing I've done. I find the shorter distances where you have to give it all as fast as you possibly can over a short distance a lot harder. Even like a 5k at Parkrun, obviously it's not a race, but if you go as hard as you can, you'll be absolutely exhausted at the end of that. And at the end of the 100k, I wasn't exhausted. I couldn't walk for 2 days, but I never felt the same level of tired as I do at the end of sprinting a half marathon or something.
No, it is different, isn't it? I think it is definitely different. And I think if the time cut-offs had been much stricter, then that would have made a difference, because you'd have to be working much harder during the day. But because the cut-offs were so generous, I don't think it was an experience, and it was hard. It's just, I think it wasn't as hard as it was made out to be.
I'm interested in the run up to it, because I think these days, if you're thinking about doing MDS, you'd go on YouTube, you'd watch a ton of videos and so on. You'd probably see them on Instagram. You'd almost certainly know somebody else within the ultra running world or the running world who has done it, or at least someone you can get in contact and talk about it and find out what it's going to be like. I'm guessing back then that wasn't quite the same, and it was you and your mate who didn't know anything about it either, making it up as you went along.
Trying to figure it out. Absolutely. I think there were running magazines, and I think MDS produced some paperwork that gave you an idea as to sort of kit that you would use, but it wasn't like today. You would just simply Google it and you'd find everything you need. So no, it was different. We went to Milton Keynes and bought our backpacks, which I still have. We made our gaiters out of something. Can't even think what it was now. Some lacy material. We made homemade gaiters because I don't remember being able to buy them. There was an outdoor show at the NEC that we went to. We both went probably 2 or 3 months before the event that had a lot of stuff for people, competing outdoors and all sorts of things. So we bought some kit from there. But it was really just get what we think. You know, just this might work. Let's try this. And when we got there, most people had done the same sort of thing, and people would have the same sort of kit because that's what there was. It has evolved, but it was, you know, really just doing what you thought was the right thing to do. And in most cases, it was okay. It didn't feel hard at the time because that's just, you know, how you did things in terms of buying kit, knowing what kit to buy. And I did go to a talk in London. Rory, who's done Parkrun MDS 25 times, I think. Rory, the guy that's done hundreds of marathons, he did a talk in London that I did go to. And I think that was helpful and interesting. I can't remember what it was, but it was useful. And because he'd done it so many times at that point, I think he'd done it 5 or 6 times already. That was useful. But that was the only thing I went to where we got some sort of first-hand practical advice. Other than that, it was just Googling stuff. What would you eat in hot weather? How much would you drink in hot weather? What kit would you run in hot weather? And trying to find it through magazines and talking to people.
Yeah. What was kind of the makeup of the rest of the field when you were there? Because I think when it first started, it was quite elite. It was almost like soldiers or something, or people who've been in the SAS thinking, I'm going to go and run across the desert. And I guess that's changed quite a lot over the years. And you'd be almost, when you did it, would almost be directly in the middle. So I'm just wondering what it was like at that point.
Yeah, there was some top runners there. The Hansel brothers that were winning it at that point. I think they won it 10, 15 years in a row between them, 2 brothers. And there were some guys like them. But there were a lot of everyday runners like myself. Ben Fogle was there the year I did it. Yeah. He was a bit of a star there. People would often try and hook up with him while we were there. And so people like him, it didn't seem to be an elitist thing. I ended up in my tent with a few guys that were just pretty average runners like me, one of which I'm still in touch with, and he's still running. But we were just, I don't think there was a sense of elitist. You realised that there were some top runners there because on one of the days, the long day, the top 50 were held back and they started 3 hours after everybody else.
Yeah.
And I probably only gone, I don't know, 20 miles or so, and they would come past the guys, the top runners. So you knew that there were some people that were pretty. It didn't take very long for them to catch you up, even with a 3-hour head start. But overall, it was a mix. It's probably more of a mix now as well. Probably a lot more people do it that you wouldn't be seeing as top runners. But then, it wasn't. I don't think it was an elite field. There were some good runners, but not everybody.
Mm. And the big thing that some people at least talk about now is like the water and so on, and that MDS has become easier because you're allowed to carry water, I think, and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I guess 2 points to that question. You might not know this, but what was it like water-wise in your day, and also has it become easier as an event?
Yeah, it's changed, hasn't it? Now I think it's one less day, I think, and the water situation at that point, the biggest problem with the water then, if you call it a problem, was you would be given bottles of water at a checkpoint, and you could take it with you, but you had to keep it with you until you got to the next checkpoint. You couldn't, if you dropped it anywhere, it was numbered, and you would lose time, or you'd be finding some way for leaving litter in the desert. So the biggest, you try and drink as much as you could at a checkpoint, but of course if you're guzzling lots of water at a checkpoint, you're going to start running again. Wasn't pleasant either. So you needed to balance it out. Whether it's easier now or not, I don't know. I think the kit now will probably help more. I think there's been advances in technology with kit which probably helps people do it more now, but you've still got to do the distance and it's still hot. And I actually think the course-wise that we did the year I did it, looking at some of the courses since then, and for a few years I really followed it quite a lot, the course people were doing, I think we had an easy year. I think our course, judging by what some of the other people did, and even Simon, I think when Simon did it, his course was probably tougher than the one that we did. So we got lucky that year. But it's still hot, it's still sandy, it's still uncomfortable, I'm sure, even now with some of the niceties that they maybe put on now.
Yeah. And did it feel like a kind of momentous, huge, once in a lifetime achievement when you got to the end?
I did say, if anyone says I'm going to come and do this again, tell them I'm bonkers. And I've never done it again, and go and do it again, I don't think. Did it feel? It felt more so much after when I got back rather than there. it felt much more of a thing later on than actually when I was there. I think maybe because I was expecting it to be harder, and I don't want to make it sound easy, because it wasn't easy, but because of the time factor, as I said earlier, it was comfortable in terms of doing the distance. You didn't have to break a neck each day, but it felt good having done it. It just seems like such a long time ago now, it was a lifetime ago. And so I look at it every year when it comes on. I follow it when it comes on, and I just think, should I do it? I don't have a burning desire to do it again, so it probably won't happen.
And unless I'm wrong, I don't think you've done. Have you done any other ultras at all since then, or was that was your one and only ultra?
I've done a 30-mile race and a 40-mile. Nothing. Yeah, only a couple. Nothing. Yeah, the guy I work with, Steve, does them all the time, and but myself, no. It's not. It doesn't. I get bored, so it doesn't appeal to me.
Because that's the big difference, isn't it? I suppose I think sometimes it's far more of a. It can be a massive mental challenge to do the really long races. That's probably in some ways the biggest challenge of things like MDS and so on. Whereas of course, there's a physical challenge in both, but when you're running a marathon, there might be more of that physical challenge of constantly pushing yourself, of being a road runner. Do you enjoy that sort of marathon, half marathon? Because I know you've done a lot of half marathons. Do you enjoy that more than the perhaps mental challenge of just going and going and going for a long time in an ultra race?
Now, last couple of years, I've really got into. I love the conversation that you have with yourself when you're running, and you're constantly reevaluating how you're feeling. Can I run faster? Can I run slower? Do I need a drink? Do I not need a drink? Do I need a gel? What line should I take? That whole talking to yourself while you're running, and just trying to weigh up, what can I do here if I'm really trying to go for a time or trying to work hard? So I love that now. And I think if I was trying to do ultras, it's not about that. It's a different conversation, which I'm perhaps less inclined to want to have. So, I do for the halves and the full marathons. I love that constant mind battle about pushing just as far as you can go. Absolutely.
There are one or two crazy people like probably Jason Barhamundi, who's listening to this as our producer, who will say you can push all the way in an ultra, but we don't listen to them. They're completely mad. So I know what you mean. It's that kind of, you can walk in an ultra and so on, and the halves and the marathons that you do as a sort of road runner are a very different sort of beast. You've done over 50 halves, though, haven't you? Is that your favourite distance?
I think the marathon has become my favourite distance in the last few years, 2 or 3 years, and I'm hoping it will for the next few years as well. But I like the half marathon because you don't have to train incessantly hard for it, and you can run it hard, and you can be recovered within a day or so and go again. Whereas marathons are different. So I like the half marathon because you can do more of them. You can do one a week or one every couple of weeks if you want to, and I enjoy that. I enjoy that test and that challenge. So, I guess between the two, because you can do more of them and they're over quicker, half marathons are great, but marathons have that kind of allure, don't they? It's always something about the marathon.
Yeah, and I think more experienced runners, if they are regularly running, regularly training and so on, will feel that, and I don't want to do down anybody whose greatest ambition is doing a half marathon, because there's plenty of people out there and it's a challenge within itself. But I think if you're more of a regular runner, a half marathon almost becomes less of a challenge, doesn't it? Whereas the marathon, just however hard you train, it's always going to be hard.
It seems to be. I think like you say, you can train as hard as you like and you never quite know the outcome of a marathon. I guess if you train well, train hard and train often, then you can make a marathon as predictable as you can, but you still just don't know. There is something about it. Having said all of that, on my bucket list races are still things like the Western States 100, Hard Rock 100 in the US, and there's a Spanish trail run I'd like to do. So there's a couple of things I'd like to do that are really long. I can never get into those, I don't know. But generally speaking, marathons and halves, I think, or less, will be where it's at for me.
And those sort of 50 halves that you've done, are there any particularly exotic ones that you've taken on other than Northampton? Of course.
No, I don't think there are actually. I don't think I've been anywhere. All the marathons that I've done in Paris and New York and whatever have been exotic-ish, but the halves I've been more local. I've done quite a few in London recently. They're not exotic. They're just around Battersea Park or Finsbury Park or Victoria Park. So nothing exotic. I don't think I've done any exotic ones. Yeah, I don't know why. There is a Super 6 series. Is it Super 6 they call it, with the half?
Yeah.
And I was talking to someone on Sunday that's doing those, and that piqued my interest. So maybe, is it Lisbon and I think there's one in Wales and one or two places. They might be on the radar, but no, not so far.
Yeah, I've looked at that Super 6. I couldn't tell you either where they were, but that does look like a cool thing to do, actually, and a lot of fun to. Again, it's that going round and those visiting those different places while you're and running around those towns and cities which you might not otherwise go and see. And personally, I quite like the idea of that. I love running around the hometown ones as well, but yeah, heading off abroad is quite exciting, isn't it?
Very much.
Yeah. And the other thing that you've done a lot of is Parkrun. Tell us about your Parkrun journey.
Yeah, so that was 2011, I think. Milton Keynes, I did my first one, and it's never an intention to do as many as I've done then, but I'm glad I did. I've made lots of friends doing Parkrun, and it kept me running in a few years when, if I hadn't done Parkrun, I probably would hardly have run. So it kept me running, and different places. I've done quite a few in London and other places. So it's been a force of good, the Parkrun, for me, particularly with the people I've met. I think I can go through periods where I get a bit samey with it. So I try a different one and go somewhere else and try a different course. So rather than my regular, which is Northampton, but it's the people I've met there, again, some friends that I've had for 15 years or so, more, whatever it is now, 14 years, that I met solely through Parkrun, and I love it. Yeah, I think it's been a force of good.
Yeah, how many are you up to now? Am I right in thinking you're approaching 500?
Yeah, 486, I think, was the weekend. As a guy that I run with at Northampton, Ed, that he's on 485. So our plan is to run because we've done so many together. We plan is to run the 500 together. I think he will then carry on doing them every week like he always does. My plan is I will perhaps not do every week like I do now, but I say that now, and chances are I probably will. But yeah, 500's a bit of a milestone, isn't it? And if I can get there, I'll be quite. I did the first one at Northampton, so to do 500 at Northampton will be good.
Yeah, well, as you probably know, Michelle was run director at Northampton for quite some time, and I just think it's a fantastic community there, and Parkrun generally is a great community. And again, going back to like what we were talking about earlier, I think that's something that's, well, it's not new now, but perhaps was new to running, and Parkrun really accelerated that hugely, didn't it?
Yeah, Parkrun is you do get the surges, don't you, after Christmas and at various points in the year where you get more people doing it. But generally speaking, it's ever increasing. I think the numbers of people that do it, more people are aware of it, and I think people like it. You can treat it however you want to treat it, can't you? It's not a race, but if you want to run hard and fast, then you can. If you want to walk, you can. You want to jog, you can. You can do whatever you want. And at the end of it, everyone gets their time, and you can go off for a coffee and a piece of cake after, which is my favourite part of the day.
Yeah, definitely. That's my favourite bit as well. Like I say, once you've half killed yourself running 5K as hard as you can really go and relax. And I always feel, probably wrongly, that I can at that stage eat whatever I like as if I've just done an ultra or a marathon. So Parkrun has a net gain for me, but socially it does. And it's just a fantastic thing. And getting round to those different events is cool too. Are you one of those people who collects different letters of the alphabet and does all the challenges, or you just kind of like a bit of Northampton and a bit of tourism?
I've done about 40 odd different ones, I think, and so I've done a bit of tourism, but more because my daughters live in London, so if I go to London, I'll perhaps do a different one when I go there. But no, I've done the stopwatch one, but more by accident. I didn't know I had, but because I've done so many, I've done every second of every minute or whatever it is.
Yeah.
The letters thing, no, I've not got involved in that. I've not been abroad either to do a park run. I think when we went to Paris, I did plan to do one in Paris, but we couldn't. I think they stopped them in Paris, didn't they? Or stopped them in France, so couldn't do it there. So no, it's not been like that for me. It's more just I don't mind trying a new one. I like different ones. It's quite surprising how different they can be. Atmosphere, numbers, courses. So that I find that interesting. Friendliness. Some are more than others, but generally speaking, it's just trying a different one from time to time, or going to my regular at Northampton.
Yeah, we were talking in the green room before we started about one of our former Running Tales guests, the Marm, the middle-aged running man, and I don't know if you've caught his recent videos where he's been playfully, I'd like to say, winding up the parkrun community by racing them as hard as he can in an attempt to find weak parkruns and win them. As a pretty fast runner yourself, are you ever tempted to find a vulnerable parkrun?
I have thought about it. Yeah, I have about it, and I've looked at a few. There's a couple in London actually that don't get that many people, and I've looked at the times there and thought, yeah, maybe. I haven't done it yet, but maybe I would. Before was too much longer. I might try one. I came third, I think, once, or might be fourth somewhere, but I was miles behind the people at the front. They were long gone. So other than, when Mom does his, I find them fascinating, funny, and I have thought about it. I haven't yet done it, but
yeah. What time are you doing parkrun in now, Studney?
20 minutes.
Yeah. There'll be one out there to win, I think. I mean, I'm around 20, 21, 22 minutes, and I've gone to a couple, not deliberately targeting them or any, but I have managed to come like 4th and 5th at some, whereas I'll be 50th or 60th at Northampton, and you're like, this is so cool going in the top 10.
Yeah, it's sort of different, doesn't it? Northampton, 20 minutes gets you 50th. It's like you say. And so if you go to, I did Battersea Park a few weeks ago. I was doing a half marathon, but I did a park run first. And I think there were something like 140 people under 20 minutes or under 19 minutes or something. And so it would have got me 250th or something. So there's some speedy guys out there and girls.
Yeah. You've mentioned a few things already, but what's kind of next on the list of stuff to do? And again, those longer term ambitions, which seem quite lofty, actually.
Well, I really got into marathons now. I'm really excited about the next year or two, as long as I can stay injury free, which has been a bit of a problem just recently. But I did Chicago year before last. I trained what I thought was quite hard for it, and it went. I did 350, and it was a car crash. And I got back from there, thought something's wrong here. My gut said I should have run quick, and it didn't go very well. So I spoke to a guy at the club that I go to, who's a mid-40s guy, but running 2:30 for the marathon. Phenomenal runner, and you probably heard about zone 2 training or run slower. We talked about that, and so I did that, and so I did that with guidance from him between Chicago, and then I did Barcelona Marathon last February, and in the space of 4 months, I went from 350 to 315, and it was extraordinary difference just through the training difference. It was just I just was fascinated. Heart rate training, I'm sort of constantly monitoring my heart rate now. I'm running more, I'm running further, running slower, and getting quicker. So my goals this year were to do Seville and Boston, but they can't happen now. So I'm doing London in April, and then my real sort of target for this year is Valencia in December, when if I can train well and stay injury free, I'll try for 3 hours or less. But it does get. It's not getting easier. I'm not getting younger, and but I'm enjoying it. The training is great, and I think I can get quicker, and so that's my plan. So it'll be Valencia this year, hopefully London again next year if I can qualify for that, and then maybe get those majors done if I can get into Berlin and Boston.
I'm a big at my very, very amateur level, a big proponent for sort of the long runs, long slow runs for getting you faster speeds. I mean, I trained for a 50k baby ultra, and after I did that, I went and did a couple of half marathons, and kind of I set 2 PBs within 2 weeks, without really having trained for a half marathon, just from that long slow running. So I really think it has a big impact. But the other thing, I suppose, is adding things like fartlek and hill training to it. Is that something you find helps as well, getting that proper 80-20 balance?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think talking to Jason, the guy that helps me, it was sort of exactly that 80 or 90, 10, 80, 20 slow stuff, and then with interval sessions once or twice a week. Hills, I've always been a real softy on hills, and I did a race, funny for the weekend, Charnwood Hills race up in Leicestershire, where I had to stop for injury, but I've done that a couple of times, and that's got beast of hills, and I do that because I'm rubbish at hills. I have to force myself to enter an event where there's some hills so that I can do some work. But I think, yeah, the long, slow stuff and hill training, if you can do that, and it's some of that slow stuff is about ego as well, because I've done a lot of park runs when I was in the middle of my training for these marathons in 30 or 35 minutes, and people say, well, what are you doing? But it's all part of the process, and so you've got to keep your ego in check, and if the plan says long, slow, or just slow, then that's what you do, and it does work. I think you're right when you say you did your 50k and then do half marathons. It's bizarre how it works, but it works. I don't quite know what happens inside, but it does work.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you're 100% right about that, leaving your ego at the door when you're training, and when you're posting your runs on Strava, and everybody's like, oh, here's my 7.5 minute mile run or whatever. And, they do 3 of them and they're injured. But, when you're posting your 12, 13 minute mile runs, whatever they might be, when they're long and slow, you've kind of got to just be like, well, that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. And I'll see the gains from this. And I don't really care about what anybody else thinks about this.
No, you're right. Absolutely. You've just got to, if that's what the plan is, then stick to it, and it only works. But it's not easy. Running 20 miles at 10, 11 minute mile pace, when it means you're out there for 3.5 hours or so. That's a great, but the results come. So it's been the best thing I did was talk to Jason and change the training, and so far so good.
Good stuff. And what would you say to anybody else who's maybe listening to this, or anyone you might meet at Parkrun, starting out on their running journey? Why is it worth them continuing with it? And what is it that makes this sport that's kind of apart from that little period out of it, been part of your life for all of your life?
Yeah. It's a very personal thing, running, isn't it? Although you can run with a group of people, it's all about how you feel, and I don't think there's that old phrase, isn't there? You can struggle to get out the door on a run, but generally once you've done it, you get back, you always feel better for having done it. And I have to say that's pretty true. The friends I've met, lots of my friends, most of my friends, I would say, are runners or have run in the past, maybe don't now, but were runners. And I've met lots of good people, and I've been to lots of interesting places through running. So I think if you're just starting out and you think it's something you want to do, I'd stick with it. No matter what level you're at, just stick with it. You'll meet some interesting people. You'll go to some interesting places if you want to, and you just have some fun. And maybe you'll get quicker if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, definitely. And would you say one of your highlights of your running career was holding off a brave and resilient effort from Craig Lewis from the Running Tales podcast, who tried to stick with you at Northampton Half?
That's top of my list. Actually, I've got a long list, but right at the top is that half marathon. Yeah, with the top of those steps, and I could see you on my shoulder. And I just got to push from here, because otherwise we'll be the whole way. So yeah, top of my list, Craig.
That's very generous of you to say. For anyone listening, that was only about 7 miles in those steps in the Northampton Half, and I managed to keep up with Studney for probably about a couple of 100 meters, and he was off, finishing way ahead of me after that. But there is a picture of me puffing hilariously while he sort of glides along. I'll definitely have to post it again.
Those steps, they do. I don't know how you find them, but I find them hard. You get to, and not very long, and not many of them. But by the time you get to the top of that, you've done them.
Oh, 100%. So for anyone listening who doesn't know what we're talking about, this is in the Northampton Half, and Simon Hollis, who's the run director and a friend of both of ours, has for some bizarre reason, known only to himself, included some steps in front of the football stadium that you have to run up. It's the only road race I've ever done where you run up steps, maybe a few ultras, but yeah, it definitely takes it out of you, and it's very controversial. It's the Marmite of the Northampton half. I think people either love it or hate it.
Yeah, I think you do have the option to run up the slip path, whatever you call it, by the side of the steps if you want, but I think everyone goes for the steps option.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good one. I think it makes the run a bit different, which is cool. Studney, just wanted to throw a couple of other things at you as we sort of draw towards the end now. We have on the Everyday Athlete podcast network, we have another show called What's in Your Earbuds, where people talk about their what they listen to when they're out running. Are you someone who will listen to music or podcasts, or are you preferring to listen to just nature and your natural surrounds?
Yeah, that changes from time. So I do go through phases where I'll take a phone and listen to some music on the way or a podcast, but rarely. Most of the time, I'm just listening to what's going on around me. I don't very often take things out. I do listen to 40 Runs podcast. I have done. If I'm doing a long run, I do a thing on a Friday, don't know, which is about an hour long, and so I'll sometimes listen to that. And when I'm really boring, I'll listen to some work stuff occasionally. But most of the time, no. Most of the time, I'm trying to just listen to what's going on, and really, because that keeps me focused on me and how I'm running, how I'm feeling, and how I'm breathing. So tend not to.
Yeah, no, interesting. I think I love to listen to podcasts. I used to listen to quite a lot of music and stuff when I was running. I don't like to be left alone with my own brain because that's a dangerous thing. But yeah, I stopped listening to so much of the music because although I enjoyed it, it made me run too fast. Once the tempo goes up, it can bust what you're trying to do, which I guess is what you're talking about in terms of concentrating on what your aim is when you're out there.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah.
So you're going to say?
No, go on.
No, I think I have tried a couple of times, because I was told that my cadence was too slow. You can get these music soundtracks where the beat is at whatever level it's supposed to be for your cadence at 180 or whatever. So I've tried that as well a couple of times where I've been out and got one of those soundtracks running in my ear and tried to, but that just messed me up. It didn't work for me. I've probably done a few miles and it just felt unnaturally awkward for me to run at that pace and listen to the music. And then because I had the music going, I couldn't run at a different pace. I had to keep going at the same cadence. So I gave that up. I haven't done that since.
Yeah, it's the B52s, isn't it? Apparently, I had Chris McDougall of Born to Run fame on the podcast on some time ago, and he told me that the perfect running cadence is to run to I can't remember which track it was, but to the B52s.
Right. Yeah, and I do often when I run around Parkrun or even a race somewhere, a half marathon, and I'm running my pace, and someone's running beside me. Now running at a quicker cadence than me, because my cadence is generally quite slow, I think. I do try and speed up and sort of get up to their pace, but it just doesn't work for me. I think everyone has their own natural rhythm of pace, and for me, if I try and change that using music and whatever, it just puts me all out of sync, so I don't do it.
Yeah, definitely. And what about things like nutrition, strength training? How important are they for you when you're taking on all these events?
The nutrition has been really important. That's changed a lot in the last couple of years since I did the Chicago thing. Before that, actually interesting, going back to the London Marathon, what we did way back, we were talking about that with some guys the other day, saying when we did the first London Marathon, you just had cups of water along the route, and there weren't gels and things, so it's very different. But now, obviously, there's gels. I try and eat better, but I love cake. So I wish cake was on a diet for runners, because I'd be a champion at that. I do like my cake and my sweet things, but I do try and eat better, particularly in the sort of, if I'm building up for a race 12 weeks, 10 weeks out, I'll try and change a little bit my diet to incorporate some of the good stuff. Some would say not very successfully, but I do my best. Strength training has been hit and miss for me. I'll do it for a while and then I'll stop doing it. I find gym work quite tedious, even though I've got a son who's a bodybuilder, and I've got people in my family that live in a gym. It's not for me. So, and I appreciate you can do a lot of strength training not in the gym, and I've tried a bit of that, but I'm not good at it. I'm just not consistent at it. So most of my stuff is just through running and with the odd bit of other training thrown in, but I'm not consistent with it. Some people swear by it and say that you have to do it and it works, and it may help me, but I haven't yet got to a place where I can do it regularly or consistently.
Yeah, I actually think I'm quite similar to that. And my big worry about taking on other things like strength training is that I know it would be good for me. Of course it would. It's obvious. There's so much evidence out there that suggests it would, but I don't like it and I don't enjoy it. And so this is terrible advice for people listening to Running Tales, by the way. Don't take on board what I'm saying at all. But I don't really enjoy it, which means it makes me worry that if I start not enjoying that, then I won't enjoy the running, and that's what I like doing. So I tend to just like do a bit every now and again, and then lose it and carry on just running again.
Exactly that. Yeah, exactly. I think the nutrition side of it, though, that you mentioned before, I think that is, I've seen a difference in that for me. So I will, I will and do spend more time reading about that, learning about that, and seeing how that can impact on my training. And I think that has helped me in the last year or two, certainly.
Yeah. Jason producing has said they're going to add a little note prior to this portion of the conversation to just warn people not to listen to a thing that is being said at the moment, as Studney and Craig tell everybody how to run and are completely wrong in everything they say.
Thanks the answer.
Yeah, but I think ultimately that almost comes back full circle to what we were saying earlier about the running show and having all the gear and all that sort of stuff. The bottom line of this sport, unless you're really, really elite, is that we should be out there trying to enjoy it, and that's what it's ultimately all about, isn't it?
Personal achievement, I think, Craig, isn't it? I think it's, yeah. Although I'm running slower now than I was 20 years ago, I'm much more at the moment. I'm much more enthused about it and trying to beat myself in terms of times and how I feel when I'm doing a run. So it's definitely a personal thing. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Studney, thank you so much for joining me today on the Running Tales podcast, part of the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. It's been absolutely fascinating talking about everything from Parkrun all the way up to the Marathon des Sables. You couldn't have two more completely different events than those. So yeah, I really appreciate you joining me and spending some time talking about running.
It's been great fun. Thanks, Craig.
Great stuff. Thank you. And thank you, everybody who's been listening to today's episode of the Running Tales podcast. If you enjoy what we do, then please give us a positive rating, a positive review, wherever you listen to this podcast or watch this podcast, of course, because we're in video form as well on the social media of Run Try magazine. The Everyday Athlete Podcast Network is a network of 9 different podcasts. There's some absolutely brilliant shows on there. You've got the likes of Joe Harden's Beyond the Finish Line, where he talks to ultra runners all around the world and endurance athletes, right the way to something completely different, where you're talking about what's in your earbuds that we mentioned during this show, and Food Fight Friday at the aid station, which is basically 2 grown-up ultra runners having a big food fight and talking about what they'd eat and carry with them and having a really good laugh along the way. So there's just so much different content. We like to celebrate the everyday athletes along us, and I hope you enjoy what we do. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll be back in another couple of weeks with another Running Tales podcast.